Today we meet a woman who took her own high-conflict divorce experience and transformed it into an opportunity to help others. She's one of Canada's foremost divorce consultants, Debrah Moskovitch.
Brought to you by AdviceScene.com. Free legal answers from verified lawyers.
Our guest today is the author of The Smart Divorce, a book that's filled with hard-learned lessons. She's included loads of advice from 100 experts, lawyers, financial advisors, and counselors to help people avoid so many of the pitfalls that can happen in a separation. She's also a divorce consultant, helping people navigate the sometimes stormy seas following separation. I'm pleased to welcome Debrah Moskovitch. Debrah, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, such a pleasure and an honor to be here.
I want to hold up your book, The Smart Divorce, which is one of my absolute favorites. And I'm not the only judge to say that we recommend this book to many, many litigants who really seem to need to hear from somebody who's been through it themselves.
It was an honor to write that book. I did not have the smart divorce. I litigated. And when you litigate your divorce, I think there are so many consequences post-divorce that are going to affect you for forever. It affects your relationship with your children for either one or both parents. It affects your co-parenting ability. And you read things in an affidavit that are really shattering. Like, how would you like to read things about you that you feel are written to destroy you, even though you were married to somebody and you loved them? So you've got to take those lessons and turn them around, and which is what I did, to say, I'm not going to live with that for forever. I'm going to learn from it so that I can let go.
Tell me, first of all, I think for anyone who has not yet read the book, you had a high conflict divorce.
Right.
It was protracted, it was expensive, you had numerous lawyers, you litigated a long time. And you have publicly said that was not a smart divorce.
No.
What is a smart divorce?
A smart divorce is one where you remove the emotions outside of the legal process. It doesn't mean you're not supposed to feel anything. It means deal with the emotions through a therapist, through counseling, even if you do it on your own, but don't take it into the legal process. And too many people, I find, take that into court. You know, they want to achieve objectives that they're never going to see. So being smart about divorce means dealing with the emotions outside of the legal process.
How easy is that to do when you consider that the divorce process is the dissolution of a marriage, a romantic partnership? Usually somebody has disappointed somebody else, or maybe
Absolutely.
both. There's so much emotion. There's pain, there's anger, there's betrayal, there's resentment. How do you take those emotions and just put them aside?
Sadness and lost dreams too. It is very, very difficult. And that's why I counsel all of my divorce consulting clients to seek therapy or to try to deal with it on your own. I think sometimes if you're forced to litigate or you're forced to move the process ahead, talk to your lawyer and say, I can't deal with it right now. Can we slow the process down? What happens is if you are forced to make decisions when you're least able to do so, then what happens years later, and this is one of the reasons why I wrote The Smart Divorce, is I can't believe the number of people that are bitter and angry years later. And they're bitter and angry because they had to make decisions when they were least able to cope.
Well, I suppose some decisions need to be made quickly in terms of interim arrangements. Other decisions maybe don't need to be made that quickly. But the impression I get is that people do want to get some kind of finality, some closure to the whole issue. But what I want to ask you is, given the fact that you litigated, which you felt was not a smart way to proceed, you made a statement in your book that I think is quite controversial. You said, courts are powerless to provide anything approaching justice. My heart bled when I read it, but I need to know why you felt that way. Because we judges try really hard to get it right and to make the best possible decisions. You know that, right?
Absolutely, and I have a lot of respect for judges. So with due respect, if I'm a litigant in front of you, you are a stranger to me.
Absolutely.
So it's a stranger who's making decisions on behalf of the family. You don't really know what went on. You know what you read in terms of an affidavit. So someone who has a lawyer that's not as strong as the other party, that could be a real disservice. I also feel that if you're fighting over something that's more philosophical than factual, you're not fighting over the division of assets, you're not fighting over a parenting plan, you're fighting over something philosophical that you feel is in the best interest of the child, of your children. It's philosophical. I don't really think that that belongs in court. That's something that I've learned. The other thing that I've learned is, in Canada, we have no-fault divorce. Actually, in most of North America, it's
yes.
no-fault divorce. So
Yep.
the reasons behind the divorce don't matter. Now, you really might have been wronged. You might have been a victim of abuse, domestic violence, substance abuse,
Emotional
abuse,
Sure.
financial abuse, whatever it was. And you know what? You really were wronged. But that does not necessarily play out in court. It doesn't really matter. Like, I'll give you an example. I have a client who signed an agreement, a line of credit agreement with her husband, and they agreed to take $20,000 out of that line of credit. She didn't know that he had a gambling addiction. It turned out that he took an additional $25,000 out.
Oof.
They went through divorce, and now she was on the line for $45,000 in the line of credit, not $20,000. So you see, like, if she wanted fairness, she should only have been involved. She should have been responsible for only $10,000, half the 20. But no, she was responsible for half the 45. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of the fairness that you're looking for.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I thought you were referring really to vengeance. My impression is that many litigants' definition of justice is vengeance, being validated, being vindicated, and you know better than anyone that that's not necessarily what the judges, that's not what we're in the business of doing. It's granting vengeance.
No, I think what you're trying to do is grant fairness. But
Fair, and getting the right result. Now, when we come back from the break, I'm going to ask Deborah her views about the legal profession, about what you need to know about how to get the right lawyer that meets your needs. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Family Matters with our guest, Debrah Moskovitch, author of The Smart Divorce. I want to ask you what you have to say about the legal profession. You had how many lawyers throughout your divorce?
I went through 3 lawyers.
3.
But
What happened?
Well, and I have to say that there were 3 excellent lawyers. The difference is I didn't do my own due diligence and ask questions up front. So my first lawyer, who was recommended by a close family friend, thought that this leading lawyer would be excellent for me. But the truth is, it wasn't the right personality fit for me.
A personality fit?
Yeah. When you see a lawyer, and this is what I counsel all my clients, is you have to feel very comfortable sharing some of the most personal and private issues in your life. And if you don't feel comfortable disclosing some of those things, then that might not be the right lawyer for you. Or the personality of that lawyer might not be right for you, because if you've got certain specific issues like financial, you need to see a lawyer whose expertise is more on the financial side. If you've got more child-related issues, you might want to see a lawyer whose expertise is on that side of things.
But why would anybody ever need 3? How could it? Were you happy with the 3rd one?
I was happy with the 3rd one, and I actually was happy with the 2nd one. The problem with the 2nd one is I did not ask the questions like, will you be around if I have to go to court? And that lawyer happened to travel quite extensively. So that lawyer was not the right lawyer for me.
So the advice you give your clients is to interview the lawyer first to find out if there's a good personality fit and if they're going to be able to meet your needs in terms of the issues you have
Absolutely.
to dispute over?
So I counsel all my clients to go for 2 or 3 consultations. They should meet with the lawyer because, number one, you're going to be spending a lot of money with that person. So make sure that it's someone you want to work with.
Well, we have a lot of lawyers that watch this show and judges. I think this would be a golden opportunity for you to say, if you could give one message to the legal profession, the family law bar, what would it be?
I think you really have to understand the emotions of your client. If your client is really not prepared to process the divorce, perhaps you can slow it down a little bit.
You've talked about this a lot, that in a relationship breakdown, both parties are not necessarily at the same stage emotionally.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think of a person, let's say, that's been having an affair for a few years. They've already emotionally disengaged from their partner. They're ready to move on. The other one just found out that the marriage is over, had no idea, they've had a bomb dropped on their life, and they're not ready to talk about selling the house and moving on.
That's right. You've got the leavor and the leavee. So the person that was left, they're blindsided. They had no clue. Oftentimes it's unbelievable how people have no idea that their partner isn't happy.
No, we see it in court. People are numb. They can't, they thought they were happy.
And then they've got to make all these decisions, like where am I going to live, what's happening with the finances, what's happening with the children. Like all of a sudden, they're numb, they're paralyzed, they don't know how to move.
But you say to get counseling, how long does that take? I mean, you've got another partner there who wants to get this over with. You've got a lawyer that you're paying by the hour. Just how long of a luxury can you have to get this dealt with until you're ready to deal with it?
That's an excellent point. And sometimes clients don't have the luxury of time, and sometimes they don't have the luxury of waiting around for finances and everything else. So what I tell my clients as well then is, do you have someone that can go with you to meetings? Someone who can tell you what it is that you should be hearing, not what you would like to hear, but what you need to hear. Sometimes people don't process that.
But that raises another issue in your book about the phantom board of directors.
I know.
The Greek chorus, I like to call them. You know, the family that's behind the scene that may even be paying the legal fees, who seem to want to control, have their own agenda.
You know what, though? That's a good. That though is a really good message for the person that's trying to control that agenda, because sometimes they need to hear from the lawyer why it is that you can't be acting out on certain things. Like, why is it that the finances can't be divided in a certain way? Why is it that the parenting plan has to be divided? You know, you're sharing your time with your co-parent in a certain way. I think it's really important sometimes for those messages to be communicated to your family.
So maybe if the lawyer sees that the client actually has a very strong relationship with someone else who's giving them a lot of advice and being the emotional support person, they should be at the lawyers' meetings too, because they need to hear the same advice?
Yes, because sometimes that phantom board of directors, they're pushing you to make bad decisions.
It happens.
And that happens very, very often. I see that in my consulting practice. And you're pulled because you want to make everybody happy. You might have someone else that's paying your legal bills, so you kind of have that agenda to fulfill, and you actually might not feel that it's in the best interest of your children. So if you bring that individual with you to the legal meeting, then you know what? That might really, really help you.
You also said in the book that you have to treat your divorce like a job. Hopefully not a full-time one.
No, because if it's a full-time job, it takes over your life, and then you can't function effectively. You have to treat your divorce like a business transaction. So let me give you the acronym for SMART, as in smart divorce. A, state your goals and objectives up front. Oftentimes, don't you find that people are chasing something that they're not going to get?
Yes.
Either they want a windfall, they want a certain amount of money, and you know, based on the Divorce Act, that you're only going to get a certain amount.
So you need to have expectations that are reasonable. And I would imagine the lawyer's part of defining those expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know when you talked earlier about what should the lawyer know? Education. So M is to maximize your knowledge base. You really have to understand, what does it mean to negotiate? What is mediation? What's arbitration? What's litigation? What does it mean to me if I end up litigating? What's that going to do to the best interest of the children? So maximize your knowledge base. If you don't know the information, ask your lawyer, and don't leave your lawyer's office without the right answers.
And A?
A is avoid reacting to your emotions, which you spoke earlier. It's so important to
And R?
R is retain the best counsel that you can afford. And T is treat your divorce like a business transaction. Do the due diligence.
That's a very succinct way of summing up what the approach a person has to take when they're going through a divorce. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to ask Deborah about all of the expertise that came from about 100 experts in her book, and also we're going to get into what exactly is a divorce consultant. We'll be right back. Back with Debrah Moskovitch, author of The Smart Divorce. I mentioned in the intro that your book is really filled with these gems, these pearls of wisdom from about 100 experts, and especially financial advisors and counselors. Yeah. You really do believe that a person going through this process needs a support system of this kind of advice?
It's really expensive if you make mistakes. So this way you bring in the experts up front. For instance, what do you tell your children about the divorce? How do you talk to your children that you and your partner are separating? I think
Well,
it's
what
critical.
do you tell parents?
I tell all of my clients to see a parenting expert, that if they don't know the script, that they should develop one. Tell them together, let your children know that you love them very much, and that the divorce isn't your fault.
You are not a fan of the parents who try to hide the breakup from the children and put on a show about how mommy and daddy have just decided to live in separate homes?
Don't you think that's a little bit confusing for the children? Is that really in their best interest?
I think kids can tell when their parents are not happy. I think kids are much more perceptive than many parents give them credit for.
Yeah, and I think that you need to have a conversation with your co-parent up front to talk about how the children's time is to be shared and who's making decisions and how that's going to play out.
So you're a divorce consultant. Can you tell us briefly what a divorce consultant does?
Well, one of the things that I realized and I learned through my own divorce is that how important it is to have information about divorce process. It's more than just the separation agreement. It's about the finances of divorce. How do you prepare yourself financially so that when you see a lawyer you can cut down on your legal bills? What is the information you need? That's number one. Number two is your children. If you've got children, how do you prepare yourself to be a better parent for your children? You're so emotionally distraught that you need to learn different parenting skills. What about life post-divorce? So there's a lot of things that we cover, and even choosing a lawyer. I went through 3 lawyers. I don't want my clients to go through 3 lawyers. I want them to take their time up front to find the right lawyer for them.
Is it an expensive thing to have a divorce consultant?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I could save my clients thousands of dollars.
So it may be not only good emotionally, but it's also a smart business decision.
I think
to
so.
get somebody who could steer you in the right direction and save you from making big mistakes.
Without sounding biased, I get a lot of referrals from lawyers, mental health professionals, and those individuals are telling me that their clients are much smarter. They're making better decisions.
Tell me, now I'm aware that you write in the Huffington Post. You're also the divorce expert for More Magazine.
Yes.
I read one of your articles in Huffington Post, and you wrote that you don't like people using the term broken home.
Oh,
Why not?
Isn't that derogatory? Isn't that awful? I think that I have a very functional household. And as a matter of fact, just because a family's been reconfigured to just a single parent household, does that mean that there's something wrong with it? I mean, as I say in that article, my house may be run down, but it's certainly not broken.
You know, you make a good point, and I think that the imagery that we use to define separation, divorce, is very negative. It's a broken home, family breakdown, as opposed to transition. But what fascinates me more is that there's such a need out there for information and resources. I mean, you started with the book. It was clear that the demand on your expertise has grown so much, not just with your writing, but you now have developed a new tool. And I'm holding it up here. It's a series of CDs. Can you tell us about this divorce resource kit?
Yes, it's called the Smart Divorce Resource Toolkit, and it comprises of 13 smart guides, which are different tip sheets about different topics, like living separate and apart within the same house, or even living separate and apart and what do you do and how do you move, the finances of divorce, parenting through divorce, co-parenting. There's so many different topics and aspects of the divorce process that people don't necessarily consider. And then I have 4 separate CDs. The first one is on the emotional side of divorce. How do you grieve? How do you heal? What is it all about? What are your children going through? The second one is on the legal divorce, talking about all the dispute resolutions, finding a lawyer, working with your lawyer. It's a job for you too. The third one is co-parenting through divorce, smart co-parenting. What does that mean? What's the parenting plan? And the fourth one is rebuilding your life post-divorce.
You know, what I like about this is that people who may live in remote areas where they don't have access to a divorce consultant, people who can't afford a private divorce consultant could obtain this kind of information. Maybe they can borrow it from their libraries. Maybe they can borrow it from their lawyers or buy it and get some information that will hopefully steer them in a pain-free direction. There's just so much pain connected with family breakdown.
So much pain. And don't you think people need to be informed and educated? Information is knowledge, and knowledge is power. And what better a resource than the Smart Divorce Resource Toolkit?
I understand you are also hosting your own radio show.
I am, and I really was fortunate enough to interview you. And we talk about tug of war, and I think it's just so fabulous. But what I've been able to do is bring in the leading experts across North America that people really don't get to hear from. These are individuals that educate the professionals. So I am researching different topics, and I'm also sharing compelling stories of individuals just like myself who are making a difference through their experience through divorce, helping others.
One of the really nice things about your message is that you see divorce as a beginning and not necessarily an end. I mean, you went through a terrible time. I don't know if everyone is familiar with you. You have 3 children. They were very young when you broke up.
They were 1, 3, and 7, and today they're 16, 18, and 22.
And you saw divorce as an opportunity to reinvent yourself.
I didn't see it at the beginning, but I have to tell you that if I wanted to be a happy person, if I wanted to be a good parent, that I really needed to find a way to rebuild my life and find happiness and contentment. And that's what I was able to do through a lot of hard work.
Well, when we come back, I'm going to ask Deborah to tell us about a very symbolic gesture that really became a metaphor for how she lives her life, and it involves her engagement ring. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Back with Debrah Moskovitch, who tells her clients that they should reframe their life. What do you mean?
You've got to reframe your thinking. Turn negatives into positives. Let me give you an example. My ring. This was my engagement ring. It was very symbolic as a symbol of love. But I'm not married to that man anymore. He's a great co-parent. But you know what? As soon as my book came out, I decided I'm going to take a little bit of money from the advance that I got, and I made it my empowerment ring. Now it has a different meaning to me. So from one side of things, it meant love, and another side it meant I've got a great life.
I love the positivity in your message. I love the fact that you can take pain and transform it into an opportunity to grow and learn and help others. Thank you so much for being on the show, Deborah. From all of us here at Family Matters, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.